Today I want to talk to you a little bit about one of our reporting tools from Veeam, VeeamOn. My name's Joe Gremillion. I am a solutions architect out of Texas. And my email address and my Twitter account and my blog file. One of the tools that we have that a lot of people like to talk about is Veeam One. Veeam One's our reporting and monitoring tool. One of the cool things about Veeam One is the reporting database that it has is really nice. Let's see if I can get this to work. All right, we're going to go manual here. There we go. Virtualization, right? So what do? Well, of course, Veeam's known for backup replication. We also have a monitoring and reporting tool. Monitoring and reporting tool is really cool. It helps us get insight into what's going on in VMware and Hyper-V. So when you stop and think about how things work today, today's modern data center, virtualization is probably key to the whole thing. Virtualization was really cool when it first started. Is that okay? Okay. Virtualization was really cool when it first came out, right? Started turning all those physical machines into virtual machines, put them on a host. But what happens, right? Things start getting a little hairy. You start getting more and more VMs on there. People realize how easy it is to spin up a VM. You don't have to go out and buy a physical server anymore. You don't have to wait for the hardware to come in. You don't have to pick your hardware specifications out of the box, get everything ready to go and put up for that, right? So, after a while, you let your environment go, you get a more mature environment, you go from version 3.5, version 4, 4.1, version 5, 5.1, version 6. Things get a little out of control, you don't know what you have out there. You go into the brand new servers that they have out there with 24 cores, you get a terabyte of RAM in them. Pretty soon you're running 40, 50 VMs a host. You have 500 hosts out here. You got all these VMs, right? All these VMs start popping up. Some of them are turned on, some are turned off. Half the time you don't even know what's going on and everything just turns into a mess, right? So, what do you end up with, right? Sprawl. You got all these VMs everywhere. You don't know what's going on. You got to get control of the environment. People are just adding stuff out there willy-nilly if you don't have tight control on your environments. Maybe you're giving your administrators a little bit too much freedom to go ahead and add a couple VMs. Either that, they come to you with a whole list of VMs they need. I need 20 VMs that have 6 gigs of RAM each. They have eight processors, right? We pop them in there. They're showing up everywhere. Pretty soon, you get this mess. You don't know how to do it. How did this happen? Where everything's at? How do I get control out there? I don't know what's going on, right? Is this stuff getting backed up? I don't know if it's getting backed up. I didn't even know where it got added to it. How did it get added there? I don't know, right? How do you get control of that? How do we bring that stuff back? Find out what you have. What tools you get for turning off things you don't need to turn off, get rid of things you don't need to turn off. Obviously, you don't want to guess. You need something that gives you a little bit more control, tighter control over that. So this is where we step in with Veeam One. So, wrong button, right? So Veeam One. Veeam One is 3 parts, okay? It's a software install, goes on top of a server. Virtual server, physical server, doesn't matter. Sucks everything out of ESX. Every 20 seconds, we pull it out, roll it up every minute, send it into the Veeam One server. Veeam One server could be on a physical server, virtual server, with a SQL backend. Stuff comes in, we do real-time alerting and monitoring and reporting on that. Also, then we ship everything off to the database. Everything stays off in the database, and then from those databases, you can run reports, okay? The Veeam One reporter is actually a web interface. Runs on top of IIS, pretty easy to install. Gives you access to run a whole bunch of different reports. All the reports that we can run are showed up in a folder right here, right? So you can go ahead and see your different types of folders that they give you access to different types of reports, right? So here, what kind of reports can we get? We got a whole bunch of folders, as you can see here. We've got optimization reports, we've got monitoring reports, we've got capacity planning reports. What I'm just going to show here is just some of the reports that we have, where to find them, and what kind of information you can get out of them. Obviously, there's probably too many reports to talk about, but we'll go over some of the top ones. My favorite ones that I think will give you the ability to gain control of your infrastructure and pull everything back, right? So, VMware overview reports. As you can see here, this is a list of some of the VMware overview reports we have. Cluster configuration, data store capacity, guest disk space usage, host configuration, infrastructure overview, VMs configuration, VMs growth, all that stuff. One thing to note here is everything comes out of VMware, that's been reported out of VMware. The actual disk space, the guest disk space usage comes out of what's being reported through VMware tools. and what VMware tools can read out of the guest itself. Okay, so let's just start taking a look at VMs and configuration. Okay, you run the report, go there, click some parameters. You can see here when the reports are created was, I wanted the entire data center. It sucks it all in. So now I can get some information about how my infrastructure is overviewed, how my infrastructure is set up, what I have in here. I can actually now see how many vCenter servers I have, how many data centers, how many clusters, right? How many shared data centers I have, how many virtual machines. How do you know how many virtual machines you have per host, right? Or how many virtual machines are sitting inside of ESX or inside of vCenter servers, right? You don't know, really. How would you know? You'd have to stop and count them and step through all that stuff, right? How much physical CPU memory you have. Now we got a report that shows it. The first page of the infrastructure overview shows the report. Also, you can get report off of storage, see how things are in your storage, how much provision space you have, how much free space you have in there, and how many VMs you have sitting on storage. A lot of people always think, well, you know, I've got 30 VMs sitting per host. Well, that's great, right? How many VMs do you actually have in your data center, right? How tight are you on that? What's your density of those VMs sitting on that host? Is it too much? I don't know, right? Run a report like this is real good to help you gather that information and pull it back. Also, VM state report. We have a report in here that part of the report that will show you powered on and powered off. You click on that view, and it takes you into a list that actually shows you the VM state summary. It'll tell you what VMs in your environment are turned on currently, which ones are turned off. That way you can kind of start seeing if you have some zombie VMs out there. You know, those VMs that have been created, never turned on, they're just sitting there doing nothing. What about templates? It also shows you the same thing with templates, right? Templates that are sitting out there, you can get those kinds of views. Another one I really like here is VM growth. One of the problems with sprawl is people just start creating VMs willy-nilly, right? How do you know if you're creating the VMs or if you gave a manager or another server admin the ability to go ahead and create VMs? Without your knowledge, right? You can't keep track of all that. Pretty soon these VMs start showing up. How do you know how many VMs you're added every day, right? How many VMs you added per week, or who do you even know is starting to add those VMs? Well, you can run this report, VMs growth, which is in the overview, VMware overview section, and that'll start showing you which VMs were added, okay, who added them, what the name of the VMs were, how much CPU and memory they were given, and what dates they were added to, okay? Then you could also go see if people have been deleting VMs. Maybe there's a VM that somebody comes looking for and says, hey, I need information off of that server. You go looking for it and you can't find it, right? Oh my God, right? So now you can go ahead and pull a report, search back a few weeks if you wanted to, search back a month, search back 6 months, however long you wanted to, and start finding out who started deleting them. Maybe you can find a VM that somebody actually deleted. Very useful. Another good thing to remember is optimization, right? Of your VMware optimization reports. How do we know if VMware is optimized properly, if it's set up properly? What do you need to do to configure? Now, Veeam One is not one of those big red button releases where you press the big red button, makes all the changes for you, right? We give you the information, you take a look at it, you figure out what you need to do, you go ahead and fix it yourself. We give you the information, you make your choices to figure out what you need to do, so it's not a cookie cutter change. Some of the things we have in here, active snapshots, right? Everybody knows the issues with active snapshots. Back in the days, people wanted a snapshot, people wanted to upgrade, put a patch on, Windows patch. What do? Snapshot. My boss was responsible for this back in my old job. Pretty soon, 6 months later, he's calling complaining, hey, you know what? Everything's sluggish on the VM. I don't know how it works. I can't fix it. What do I do? You start looking there, they've got snapshots that have been open for 6 months, and he's got 20 of them on that server. It's like, dude, really? Come on, I told you need to remove those snapshots. You left them sitting out there. Now you can run a report, schedule a report, and run it every couple weeks so you can see who's adding those snapshots, remove them. Garbage files, VMware deletes a file, it's gone, right? You delete a VM, it's gone. Sometimes it doesn't get rid of all those files in that folder. Sometimes the log files are left there. Sometimes it leaves a couple ISOs out there. All kinds of stuff are left out there on those things. Idle templates, idle VMs, insufficient data store usage, all this stuff you can get from go ahead and run and report, and we keep historical. Now, you can go back as far as you have data in a database. We can keep it for as long as you a configured setting for as long as you want to hold it. So one of my favorites in the optimization, in the VMware optimization, is garbage files, right? So problem is, you got a VM, you delete the VM. Great, right? It's gone. Maybe it gets rid of the NX file, maybe it gets rid of the VMDK file, maybe it gets rid of the flat file, but the logs are still there. Or the swap file is still there, right? All of a sudden, you go for 3-4 years of deleting files, you never go back and check and see if the files are actually deleted, they're still sitting out there taking up space. So we can run a report here. Some of the things that we show you in this garbage file report, as you can see, we give you a nice little graphical pie chart that shows you how much wasted space you have, how much free space you have, how much garbage files you have. Well, we could go in here. Then you could go into reports and actually see the path, the folder to where the data is that's still left out there, how much space it is. And if you actually click on one of the blue links, it opens up another drill down report, a garbage files report, and actually shows you what files are still left there, okay, when they were modified and how big the garbage file size is. Now, how do we know if it's garbage files? Well, actually, we scan the data stores, and if there's any folders out there that are not associated with a VM, an active VM registered in either vCenter or on the host, then we consider that a garbage file. We go and delete that. Obviously, you may end up having to use some discretion when you start deleting stuff. In example, in my lab, and you can see it here, one of the folders I have is for ISOs, right? Obviously, the ISO files aren't going to be associated with VM because they're outlying files, right? So I wouldn't want to go ahead and delete that, but maybe the next VM down, there's a bunch of log files left and I need to reclaim some of that space. That's a good way of going back and checking on the health of your data stores, trying to reclaim some of that usage space that's sitting on those data stores, especially if you're having issues with things filling up too fast, right? Another thing is oversized VMs. I love the oversized VM report. How many people have had people come up, how many of you had people come up to you and say, hey, you know what? I need 8 CPUs for this VM, and it's, by the way, it's got to have 64 gigs of RAM. Hello, right? Best practices for VMware, the less CPU, the better, right? And less wait time, CPU ready. 68 CPUs, maybe a little excessive, 64s, but they insist they have to have it. So back in the day, they used to tell us at VCP class, my first VCP class I went to start restricting everything, right? Tell them and give them 64 gigs of RAM, limit them to 32, limit them to 8. Well, how do you know if that's enough limits, right? Or suppose you could just have the argument and say, hey, why don't we just pull it back instead of putting limits on it? It'd be easier for you to control. Well, one thing you could do is run an oversized VM report out of the VMware optimizations folder. A couple of parameters that you could set for this is, number one, you can see I have a reporting period. Over here I have it says reporting period of 2 weeks. You can go back a month, you can go back 3 months, you can go back a couple weeks, however long you want to go back to check and see if things are oversized or not. And then we can show you a list of your top 5 VMs, total VMs that it's read that are oversized, how much data you could reclaim. Then when you start going through here and flipping through the reports, now you can start taking a look and seeing how many VMs you have in here, right? And then how much memory you can get back. And what we do is we compare averages and prepare for spikes, right? So that way that we know, maybe you had a spike at 8 o'clock in the morning when everybody's logging in. We can take that spike into account, figure out if you got enough RAM for it, or if you have too much RAM and you need to take some back. So you can start having that conversation. Hey, you know what? I gave you 64 gigs of RAM. I've been watching this VM for the past 6 weeks. Guess what? It only needs 8. Okay? I'll be nice and give you 10. So you can reclaim a lot of that space back, right? Another thing is configuration tracking reports. I love these reports. Basically, these are your audit reports, right? Infrastructure changes by objects, who has permissions, what changed what, who changed what can be changed by who. One of the reports that we use all the time is infrastructure changed by user. Something happened. All of a sudden, this VM had 32 gigs of RAM, now it's got 4, right? Somebody added a data store to it. A data store was removed. Who changed it? I don't know. It happened a couple weeks ago. I wasn't even paying attention. Somebody comes to you and complains. Now you go and look at your infrastructure changes by user, and then you can start pulling reports and seeing, okay, these are all the guys that have access in here. You can see the color code down here, who have changed things in my environment, right? So you can start looking in here and see who changed what on what day and what was changed. So you can either go back and roll back the changes or go to have those conversations with them about why they changed things. Another good thing that this is used for is we have the permissions. Who has permissions to an object? That's always good for the auditors, right? Being able to show VMware permissions to each object, provide a report for them that they can go ahead and keep and then satisfy audit requirements. Next thing is custom reports. Custom reports is really nice. Okay, these are kind of reports that you can run yourself. They give you some kind of information, knowledge that you may need that are kind of outside of some of the canned reports we have. Inventory reports, VMware custom performance, if you want to to pull some kind of trending data for certain applications and objects, you can pull all that. Performance data, you can get all that. Also inventory reports, custom infrastructure, report builder. Report builder is kind of interesting. What we could do with that is actually combine a whole bunch of different reports into your own report, and then you can use that to provide for somebody. So let's say you needed a report that would go ahead and show you CPU usage, memory usage over a 6-week period. You could pull one report for CPU, one report for memory, and then give somebody 2 reports. Or you go to Report Builder and you can combine those 2 reports. We'll pull all that data, combine the graphs and the data, and give you a table of contents. You could save that out, then give it to whoever needs a report like that. One thing that I want to show you here is one of the things I really like about this is custom infrastructure report. So, you need to pull stuff out of ESX, right? You need to find some WWNs, and you've got 30, 40, 50 hosts out there. You need to find some UUIDs. You need to find VNIC properties of your physical uplinks. You need to know MoRef IDs and free space on your data stores because you're trying to find them. You have some kind of program that's going to call those and modify that data. How do you do that? Well, our custom infrastructure report is pretty cool. What we do is, remember, we collect everything into Veeam One, pull it out of ESX, roll it up, send it, and we keep it in a database inside of a SQL server. Then we pull data out of that. So now you can come in here and say, okay, data store clusters, I need to know what the data stores in my data store clusters, what VMs are running in there, what kind of policies. Each one of these items in the select object type here all have different attributes associated with them that we can pull out, put in report. So this report here that I made, right, you can see the scope is a virtual infrastructure report. Okay, I wanted to pull it from the storage objects, and the columns or the attributes I needed was I wanted capacity, free space, and the MoRef IDs of the VMs. Okay, so as you can see, I run the report, it shows me some capacity in my data stores, it gives me a MoRef ID. Now, I could have added the name, which probably would have been a little bit more useful than MoRef ID, but I got the MoRef IDs that I needed. You could also use this to pull UUIDs off of storage adapters, VNIC settings, all kinds of stuff. This is really helpful when you have a lot of hosts and you need a lot of information from the hosts and you want to do them quickly without having to go dive through all that, keep that data yourself. Another thing that's really cool that I really like, this report was actually taken out in a version and a lot of end users fought to get it put back, is called the inventory report. So, like I said, we suck everything out of ESX and store it. Well, we can even pull out data from configuration data from the VMs, read the data out of VNX files, and then we could also read the data out of the host configuration files, right? So, what's the inventory report do? A couple things. You could go ahead and select parameters, say I only want to pull inventory for certain hosts, or I want to report for all my environment, or just this section of my environment, and pull it out of here. What I did here is I went ahead and ran a report for everything in my environment. As you can see now, it's starting to show some kinds of stuff on my object names, right? So my HBA zeros is showing all kinds of settings and properties and values that I have for my HBAs out of here. I can also get this NICs, any kind of setting, all your settings are put in here. One word of warning when you pull this inventory report, it could get pretty big. This was 40 pages for 100 VMs. My old job, I had 375 VMs. I decided I was going to print this out. It printed out 2 reams of paper and it took a couple hours to print. Needless to say, my manager wasn't very happy with that. It tied up the printer. So what I always recommend you do is save this to a PDF and then email it to somebody. Let them decide if they want to print it out or they can print out the pieces that they need. Put it in a nice notebook. I know this doesn't have a lot to do with sprawl, but this is just kind of a good way to go ahead and have documentation of all your settings inside in case you ever needed it to refer back to it. You can find it. If you dump it into Excel, you can search the Excel spreadsheets, however you want to do it like that for the terms. Another good report that we like to talk about is offline reports, right? So offline reports. These are reports that are basically just pulled outside of ESX. We build them differently and show the stuff to you. And it's not really things that we can categorize too awful well. A couple of things we have is infrastructure growth, where we could show you a nice little flash animation that shows when and how and who put your VMs in and how they stacked up and grew over time. It's a nice fun animation. You can take a look and see how things were going, get that information out in a visual view. Another thing too is raw data analysis. We just dump all this stuff in a workbook and then you go ahead and run your own pivots. You need to know performance trends for this and that, and we don't have a canned report for it. Dump it in Excel, pivot on it, and you're good. Another thing that's real popular is the infrastructure overview in a Visio report. So we can go ahead and take all that information out and build you a Visio report. From that Visio report, then you can go ahead and drill down and get different information about your environment. So the Visio report looks like this. Obviously, in order to use this Visio report to view it, you have to have either the Visio viewer installed on a workstation or the Veeam server, or have full-blown Visio so you have something to open this up. But you can kind of see how the data center's rolled out, how I got hosts rolled out here, VMs associated and everything like that. This is always nice documentation to provide for your environment. Maybe it's something you could refer back to. It said this was the way it used to look when I installed it. Look how it looks now. This is the way we've grown. All stuff is spread out, kind of get a visual representation of all that. So, what's our goal here? Well, number one, our goal is to help you get a handle on your virtualization environment. Help with that flexibility, help regain some of that sprawl, help regain some of that performance that you used to have, and then help you enjoy the benefits of virtualization in the first place. You virtualized because you wanted flexibility. You wanted ease of management. You didn't want to virtualize because you had to deal with all the sprawl. People are coming to you about all kinds of stuff you needed, stuff they want, and it gets out of there. And least but not least, my whole goal is to help you sleep better at night knowing that your virtual environment is managed better and good and ready to go. Thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day. Done.